So Will Kramer, South Carolina insider, lives on campus. Has you worked for the university for some years?
I did about 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah, you are a Gamecock yourself, one and only, and I love it. I love it. Talk to me, man. This is something that you're immersed in. You know what I mean? Because I know you didn't go there. I mean, you went to Shepherd, but still to be there. You talked about being on campus, being a part of everything, and just living there, and how you're in it. Like, talk to us about South Carolina, the Gamecocks, man.
Yeah, no, appreciate the time and get a chance to, because things have radically changed here in Columbia in the last couple of years with the arrival of Shane Beamer, because things were getting pretty bleak under Will Muschamp. But yeah, I was on campus from 2008 to 2013, and I was there for the glory days of Steve Spurrier, and like I mentioned earlier, the Clowneys came, Lattimores and Jeffries, and they just completely changed that program and the national exposure that got with it, and the campus just came alive during that time when you've got a solid, a really strong football team. They beat their rival Clemson 5 years in a row. And so it was just like, it was the greatest time to be on campus. And I was here, and I was young, I was single. I could go out and watch every game. I could go to every game. I could do whatever I wanted, so it was a great time. But there's been some lean years, but things are starting to rise up again. And there's a lot of excitement here right now. Shane Beamer's, he's changing the culture. He's brought the excitement back. And it's making some dividends. And I reached out to you guys because today they were in the headlines, and for big reasons for them. And so it's like it might be kind of fun to tie this in and come on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah, you guys picked up a major recruit, and we're gonna get into that. But you mentioned something before that I'm excited to hear about, because he really burst onto the scene for a lot of America last year when you had that 4 or 5 game win streak, middle of the year. You upset Tennessee, and you look good. Talk to us about Shane Beamer. He's your main guy, your head coach, and I mean, we're hearing stories about these Luke Fickell, a lot of these great upstart coaches that really build up their team. You really have a team that that wasn't the greatest at certain times, like you talked about, but he's really rejuvenated not just the team, but that whole area.
Yeah. Man, what a hire by athletic director Ray Tanner. And Ray was on the hot seat during this time because he picked Will Muschamp, and he made some other coaching hires in some other sports that were not working out. Muschamp was a huge failure, and he went with this young guy. And Shane Beamer, at this point right now, it's almost as if he's got the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan's of college football, where he's not this big X and O's guys, but he's a recruiter. He's enthusiastic. He's likable. It's kind of like when Dabo burst onto the scene and Clemson started having some of their success, and people liked they liked Dabo. I think they're tired of him now and his shtick, but Beamer's very likable, and it's allowing people from across the country to see hey, this guy's he's young, he's got energy, but people forget that he's got experience and he's got exposure. I mean, obviously Shane Beamer, he's the son of Virginia Tech legendary head coach Frank Beamer, and he was around there for a while from his dad's program, but he was here in South Carolina. Shane Beamer's the one that convinced Jadeveon Clowney to come to South Carolina. So recruiting has always been in his chops. He was the recruiting guy for South Carolina when DJ Swearinger came, when Stephon Gilmore came, when Lattimore came, when Jeffrey came. So when they had their biggest years, that was him. And then he turned it over to Steve Spurrier Jr. and he left, and it all went downhill from here.
Yeah.
But after going back to his dad at Virginia Tech, he said, hey, I want to have a chance to finish out my dad's last couple of years. He was at Georgia, and then he was at Oklahoma working under Lincoln Riley and Bob Stoops. So he's been around a lot of legendary coaches and a lot of programs that have had a lot of success. And basically he's taken that role of CEO And he's that motivator type. He's the accountability. They preach the word they use is love down here, which is kind of weird to talk about football and masculinity, but it's about family, it's about trusting your guys, and it's about getting people to buy into the program. And it's working.
It's great. I mean, hey, it's great that he's getting so much of that attention, especially with, I mean, let's talk to the elephant in the room, Dawn Staley and the ladies basketball team. And we know that dominates all the news out there. But Beamer's really set himself apart, in my opinion, as, I am here too. It's not just, Dawn Staley and the other coach. It's me and what I've been able to do. So it really makes me think very highly of you guys. And that's one of the things I was worried about for week one, just because he has you guys so motivated. And I'm just loving what he's doing out there.
Right. Well, and what's crazy about it is Ray Tanner had to choose between a couple coaches, and he was considering Shane Beamer, and he was considering the name's blanking on me now, but Billy Napier, who's at Florida. Yeah. Those were the final two, and they both have South Carolina ties, and he was trying to figure out. And you're picking one who was a rising head coach at Louisiana, who was guaranteed to get a step up somewhere, versus a guy who had never been a head coach before. Like, that's a bold decision to make. But one of the things that Tanner was looking for was someone who wanted to stay at South Carolina for years to come. And it's sort of a situation where, like, people think, well, Shane's going to establish himself and go back to Virginia Tech and take over his legacy. But Shane was here. His first kid was born when he was here, living in Charleston. I think his dad might have been around the Citadel at the time or something like that. But he was down here, and he's a lifer. So I can't say like lifer to this job, but he's really bought into Columbia. You mentioned Dawn Staley. He loves her program. He attends their games. She actually comes over during big recruiting weekends and meets the players, because he says he gets as much requests by the players and the moms to meet Dawn that he does anybody else. So they're neighbors, and so she walks over and says hello on to breakfast and with players and stuff. So it's a family of athletics. He goes to the college baseball games. He'll go out to the World Series if they make it there. He attends. So he's really a fixture in the community, and it's really gotten this whole buy-in of the program by just jumping into it and not just saying, I'm a football coach. That's what I do. Yeah. I'm not the head ball coach, essentially, is what he's the opposite.
Right. I love that. But let's go on. Let's go on from that, Alex. Let's ask about the team and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, when you guys look at when people look at the roster from the outside, obviously people go to the quarterback first, Spencer Rattler. But you guys have a lot of very good players around him, recruits, transfers, returning guys. So kind of talk to us a bit about what you guys got going on there for the roster.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the number one guy on the team that, the face of the team is Spencer Rattler. And this school has never had a passer with the talent that he can do. Even when he struggled last year, some of the throws he would make, we'd all just be sitting there like, whoa, is this what it's like to have a pro quarterback? Like, this guy he's got an arm on him. And things really came together at the end, which I kind of will get to as, a little bit later. But the other guy is his receiving, his favorite target is Juice Wells, who transferred from JMU, came from a 1AA, moved over to South Carolina, and towards the end of the season especially tore it up, and they really had a good connection. So those are kind of the top guys. Actually, you wonder who the number 3 best players, and Sean will understand this. Yeah. We have a stud punter by the name of Kai Kroger.
Let's go.
Okay.
And he pins these teams back and makes defenses go, 80, 90 yards. It's kind of crazy for me to be hyping up one of the punters, but he was phenomenal last year in changing the field position, and also part of Beamer ball, just like his dad.
Yes.
Kai Kroger was throwing, passes and they were running fakes and, just putting that whole special team swag to things. So he actually was a pretty good player. But you're right about, they've got some transfers that have come in. This is wild. They don't have a single returning tight end in their room. They had to completely flip it, because you mentioned him a couple weeks ago. They lost Jaheim Bell to Florida State, which is a huge loss because they underutilized him last year. And he said, I'm out of here. and he went somewhere else. And then the other guy, Austin Stodner, went back to Oklahoma. He came with Spencer from Oklahoma. And let me tell you, he had slow feet. He had like brick feet on him, and he was terrible last year. So he went back to Oklahoma, went to, I guess, the Pass Happy League that is that conference. But they've been able to get some recruits, get some transfers come in. They've got some underrated tight ends that I can't tell you the guy from Arkansas that's going to be the tight end, but he's actually supposed to be like under the radar and impressing. And they brought in a wide receiver from Memphis by the name of Eddie Lewis. Okay. And there's a real good chance I think the offense is just going to explode, and he's someone that's like not many people know about, but there's a real good chance that he's going to be featured a lot. Overall, for the recruiting, it ended up being 16th in the nation. So that was pretty high. They got a lot of local guys. South Carolina's Mr. South Carolina Football Player of the Year, a defensive lineman. They got some Georgia guys. And then most importantly, he nailed his first 5-star in Nick Harbor, coming from he's got a pipeline going on to the DMV right now with some players. And he got Nick Harbor is a wide receiver, tight end, hybrid athlete. He's a track star. And this guy chose South Carolina with track as his second big sport over going to Oregon, which is kind of wild. And their track team.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely love that. Hey, there you have it. Absolutely. Now let's get down into it. We know what you and I have talked about. And, we keep going back and forth about the season opener. Will and myself will be going to that game. I'm going to bring up, let me see the screen right now. Take the audio off. Alrighty. Can we see it? All right.
Yep.
We have our schedule right here. First game at Charlotte, North Carolina. North Carolina versus South Carolina in a great game. Something that's now being dubbed the QB duel. I am very eager to see what both of our quarterbacks can do, but you mentioned you had some issues with your defense. It's well documented how we've done. Talk to us about this first game, and genuinely, what do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a toss-up right now. I favor South Carolina because I think the offense – well, that's the big key for South Carolina. This is the unknown right now, and this may hurt you guys, is the fact that there's a new offensive coordinator here in Columbia by the name of Dowell Loggins. So nobody knows what the offense is going to look like. And they built a lot of momentum up at the end of last year. You mentioned, they put up, I think, 5 or 6 touchdowns in a row on Tennessee. Right. They put up over 30 points on Clemson. They put up, almost 50 points on Notre Dame. Like, the offense completely changed at the end of the year. Rattler came alive. Like, something changed. Something clicked, and something changed. And so we don't know what this team's going to look like on week 1. So it's hard to predict, other than there's a lot of continuity for South Carolina on offense. And so I would anticipate that it's going to be a high scoring, where it's going to be a shootout. And I'm going to lean Gamecocks. Obviously, I'm biased in that, but I think it's going to be a pretty good game.
Yeah, if we're being realistic, I genuinely think this is a game that's going to come down to one of the last couple drives in the game. It's going to be a couple turnovers maybe, but it's going to be a back and forth gunslinging game, and it's going to come down to the end. Hopefully, our defense is not the one that's on the field last, because do not have that much trust in them. But yeah, it's a coin flip. I think we'll get the dub, but what else would you expect me to say?
Right.
And then the next week, Furman. So you get a little bit of a breeze. Are you expecting any type of hiccup? Even because we see what's coming up after that, is there any chance that you overlook Furman?
No, and that's one of the beauties of Beamer right now. He's got these guys focused, and he doesn't allow that to happen. They could have done that against Georgia State the year before, and he didn't let that happen, and they rolled Georgia State. So wouldn't be worried about that game one bit.
Cool. So we got it at 2-0. Let's move right along. 2, and I see Anthony Handy and Colin are in the comments. You see what it is. Let me get this out from in front of your face. Georgia South Carolina, in a game I am so excited to see. What are your thoughts genuinely about this game?
I think if there's ever a time to pick off Georgia, it's going to be early in this season as they have to figure things out with this quarterback. I'll say this, that little ranking that put Carson Beck in front of Spencer Rattler on the top 50 quarterbacks, that's complete bull.
Yeah.
He's so unproven versus someone who put up some numbers. You can't do that. So that would be my only, I think that's an opportunity. I don't think South Carolina is there yet to compete with Georgia. I mean, I think they're going to get there in another year or two. I think we're going to be back to those years where South Carolina and Georgia battled every single year. It was either close games and, it didn't matter who was at home. The other team could steal it pretty easily. But I just don't quite think that South Carolina on defense is there yet. I really don't know who Georgia has on offense, honestly, besides Brock Bowers. I don't, with some of the guys that went pro and all that. And I know they've got a lot of guys that went pro on defense, but they've got enough people in reserves that I would still think Georgia's gonna get this one. I would put it down as a loss, but I don't think it's going to be the game like we had last year where Georgia just ran them out of the stadium in the first quarter of the season of the game.
Where the hell was that at halftime? He said, "Nah, fam, Beck was ready last season. Kirby just had to go with the hot hand."
Sure. No one knows who Carson Beck is, so I mean, he might know.
Yeah.
But
how do we know? How do we know? Like, talk to us, Anthony. You saying you knew he was ready? How did you know that he was ready? Because I've never seen him, not even in garbage time. Yeah. And then when I have, I mean, the game was so far in hand, it didn't really matter. So
yeah, I mean, a lot different than live bullets in an SEC game.
Yeah. So we'll see about that. You got Georgia on this one. Next one, Mississippi State. Still having Will Rogers. Obviously, they don't have Coach Leach anymore. Rest in peace. What are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Mississippi State. Don't they have? Yeah, they've got Will Rogers as a quarterback who can sling it pretty well. I don't know much about who took over it in Starkville to really talk much about him. So I've put them down for a win on this one, just because I don't know a whole lot about Mississippi State.
If I'm not mistaken, the defensive coordinator took over, right?
I think you're right.
And so then after that one, Tennessee, the game that was starred last year, you had the huge upset. We know they're coming in with Milton this year, but a whole lot of attention on them because of all the sanctions and all those type of things. What kind of Tennessee are you getting when you start to get into the thick of the middle of the season?
This is going to be a really interesting game. This is going to be one that you'd have to look and see if it ends up being a potential game day spot, because Tennessee, let me tell you something. They are ticked off over what happened last year, because not only did their quarterback go down and the season went down, but they were just upset over the whole game against South Carolina and the fact that it was 5 or 6 possessions that South Carolina scored a touchdown. They scored a touchdown every single possession of the first half of the game. That's video game numbers stuff.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before, And so we know that Josh Heupel, he's pretty fired up for this game. And then Alex, you've even said it a couple times a couple weeks ago where you're like, where's this love for Joe Milton? You and I saw what he did in Michigan.
He was awful.
And they just think that they're like, oh, well, he's just going to take over for Hendon Hooker and he can run the offense even better. I'm like, does anybody see that he can't hit the broadside of a barn?
Yep.
Yeah, he can throw it 80 yards in the air, but who's going to catch it?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I will, but the fact that it's at Tennessee and the fact that they are fired up for this game, like they want this game. They're so mad from last year. I probably would lean Tennessee, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. I'm very interested to, like you guys, see what Joe Milton brings to the table. We know he has a cannon, but like you said, it's an interesting. But we also know that Hendon Hooker also was very poor when he was at Virginia Tech and then came over and Heupel got him turned around. So Who knows? We'll definitely see what happens. Moving down, you talked about Napier before. He's got now his 3rd year at Florida now. He's let's see. He lost his quarterback, but he still has a couple pieces. This is a big one for you guys. What are you thinking?
I don't know what this Florida team's going to be right now. I'm going to predict them beating Florida. I mean, Graham Mertz was not good at Wisconsin.
No.
And the fact that and I like him because my family lives in Madison. They're season ticket holders. So I was rooting for him. I dubbed him Heisman Mertz after that first game of his debut, and he was great. So now he's coming to the SEC. It's like, I don't know about this. And so obviously Florida always has talent, but I look at this as a key game and a game they need to win. Because they got to be able to put away some of the other teams in the division that aren't Vandy and aren't Mizzou. And you've got to beat some of those other teams. You've got to steal wins against, Florida. If you ever get lucky and get Georgia knocked up, that type of stuff. You got to get some wins there. And so they need to stay ahead of Florida here and beat them.
Well, and then speaking of, you got a Missouri following that week. And I mean, that's a win you have to have. You can't mess up in a game like this. What do you think on this one?
So this is the tough game. When you talk about trap games, is the fact that there's no love or any way to get excited for Mizzou, whether they're coming to town or going to Columbia. Both schools live in Columbia. It's just a bad game. No one gets excited for it. And in the past, South Carolina's had some clunkers against them, including last year, where it seemed like Eli Drinkwitz was going to get fired. And then they came to Columbia and they beat them pretty bad. And Mizzou walked away with a real nice win. And that kind of really ticked off some fans last year. And they're like, what is going on with this season? And South Carolina is the type of team, Sean, you're used to this with our Washington franchise, that they'll lose against a team they should win, and then they'll beat someone they shouldn't.
Yep.
So it's hard to say. It should be a win, but you never know.
But yeah, exactly. You never know, especially with the Missouri team. And then also another one with Texas A&M. I mean, with all the talent that has been that we've talked about in the last couple of years, you would expect them to do more. Jimbo Fisher as coach, but it really didn't pan out last year. And I really can't say that they've gotten better, So
who's playing quarterback for them?
Exactly.
That's the main question.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are we thinking about that one?
That's another one where, just like you said, I don't know who's at quarterback. For many, many years, they have really struggled against A&M. And last year was the first time they beat them. And that was a big, big victory here. People celebrated finally beating A&M, getting over that hump. So right now, I would say that seems favorable. But once we see that team come, October, to kind of find out who is this A&M team and are they more formidable than we thought, or like last year where they were just straight garbage.
Yeah. And then, I mean, honestly, if you guys have, a good run early on, you could coast into the bowl season. You got Jacksonville State and then Vanderbilt, and both Alex and I are expecting Vanderbilt to be a lot better, but still you're not expecting them to be that good. And, so, I mean, are these two dubs?
Yeah.
2 easy wins for you
The
guys?
only time Vandy was ever a scare was when James Franklin was there.
Yep.
And he did a great job there.
Mm-hmm.
He really made them competitive. But ever since then, and even before that, they're a rollover.
Oh, yeah. Jackson State, Vanderbilt, and then you finish off with Kentucky and Clemson. What these are big ones.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Kentucky has become a rival school here in the last couple of years. Some of it being from the fact that they beat Will Muschamp every single year. And so after being like, Kentucky never could beat South Carolina with Steve Spurrier. I don't think Steve Spurrier lost to Kentucky his entire coaching career between Florida and South Carolina. And then Will Muschamp took over and he kept losing to him. And so fans were so furious here when they kept losing to Kentucky. Obviously, Stoops has done a really good job there and made them a pretty formidable team. I think, did they get Devin Leary transferred to them this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've got some talent at quarterback. So I think they're going to be a tougher opponent than some teams give them credit for. And then there's a beef going on between Stoops and Beamer with the whole, he said something last summer at this time, Mark Stoops did, about wearing shades and sunglasses and dances based on what Beamer did, and then they beat him, and that was a big win for South Carolina. So that's going to be a tough game. I'd probably put it as a loss since it's going to be at Kentucky right now. And you
you guys are at home.
It is? Oh, yeah, verse.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but, I still put that almost as a loss. If they've got a couple wins earlier in the year, they probably will lose that. And then this is the great unknown. The Palmetto Bowl is a big game down here. This game will be at home. Obviously, this team's a whole lot better. They went into Clemson last year and won by a few points. Kind of shocked everybody with that, kept that momentum going. But Clemson had a bad quarterback last year, and he was detrimental to that offense. And so what is Klubnik going to look like this year and really move the ball? So I don't know if they're going to win two years in a row. I will see that may be kind of tough.
Okay. I can see it. It's gonna be an interesting season. So what? How many losses do you have?
I'm looking at they could be. It kind of maybe comes down to the Clemson game: 8-4 or 9-3, and I think that's kind of South Carolina's. That for years to come, they're going to be in that 8-10 range. When Spurrier had them on their highest years, they were winning 10 and 11 games. And I think that's their ceiling. And I think Beamer can get them back to that they had in the early 2010s. But I think you're looking at every year you're about an 8-4, 9-3 team. 1 or 2 games go your way, and you can get 10 wins. My thing is what I'm looking for him to do is get back to when we would go to Athens, and we weren't scared of going to Athens. And we'd run trick plays and beat y'all 45-34. I think was the one year we ran a trick play with Melvin Ingram, and it was a fake punt, and he ran it 60 yards. And we had those battles with Georgia. Those were fun because I used to go to Athens prior to the game, and the fans were like, "Oh man, you guys are gonna be good this year. That's gonna be a fun game." And that just has been lost for over a decade. But getting back to that 9-10 win opportunities, I think really is the ceiling of this program.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I think it's about winning a couple of those big ones. Health is definitely key. Winning the games you're supposed to win. But man, I'm excited to see what you guys can do. I'm excited to see how it goes. Unfortunately for you, I will be rooting hard against your team in the first week. But how else would I wouldn't want it any other way, man.
And those have been some fun games the last couple of years that we've had. When it was Sam Howell's freshman debut, people were furious here that we lost to a freshman quarterback. Again, Will Muschamp, not a good head coach. Really, it was a
name keeps coming up.
It was kind of letting us know a preview of what his tenure was going to be there. And then was it Beamer's first bowl game was when he drew all those trick plays with Jaheim Bell and DeCarrion Joyner and everything to beat you guys in the bowl game. I think it was the Mayo Bowl game. So there's been some battles. It's a very unpredictable game, which is fun. And I'm glad that both of our teams have some quarterbacks that can hype this up to make it really exciting. Because to the nation, North Carolina, South Carolina means nothing, Right. But when you talk about Drake May, that brings some folks up. You look at potential NFL quarterbacks, and he's not getting a lot of credit right now. But obviously, if Rattler continues the path that they got him on towards the end of that season, dude looked great at the end, and he could really turn into a pro prospect.
Yeah, and I mean, and look, it can't be denied. While it might not have been sustained, he's had moments of success in South Carolina, moments of success at Oklahoma. I mean, obviously, we know how it ended at Oklahoma, but there's a reason why he was so highly touted. And if he could just channel it all in, and I love what Beamer is doing with him, if he could channel it and get it going, he's good. I just hate it because there's some times where if he's not on, he is off and really off. So I'm hoping we see, obviously, a great game in that first one. We'll be there. Alex, if you see a couple guys on TV potentially running, you'll be like, oh, there they are.
Yeah.
Oh, man.